of New Jersey Foundation for Aging. And I'm so thankful and grateful for you all joining us today for this webinar. For those of you that may have joined us for the last series in June, you might be familiar with our speaker today, and we'll get to that in just a second. But I did want to touch on the fact that yesterday was National Healthcare Decision Day 2.0, they were calling it. National Healthcare Decision Day is a national movement to encourage people to have the conversation about end-of-life planning and their healthcare documents. Typically, that day is April 16th, which is usually after tax day is over. And because of the impact of COVID-19 and the issues surrounding that, they thought it would be helpful to remind people again, and for those of you who might not know, because of COVID, tax extensions were given. And so the official deadline was, the official new deadline for filing your taxes was July 15th. And so yesterday, July 16th, was National Healthcare Decision Day 2.0. And so it's timely that we're having this conversation this morning. And I hope all of you will walk away with some new tools and things to use in your practice as well. So as I said, for those of you who joined us for our series in June of webinars, you might be familiar with Carl Archer of Archer Law. And Carl was gracious enough to support through a sponsorship that series. And we're happy to have him with us here today to present this topic to you. And so we are going to talk with Carl this morning about healthcare proxies and healthcare documents. He's going to give you some definitions, some information about what those things are, and then some instructions on how you can run a clinic and assist those that you serve in making sure that they've had the conversation and that they're going to work on getting their healthcare documents in order. So without further ado, I will give you Carl. And Carl, you should have the ability there to pop your slides up. There you are. Good morning, sir.
Hi.
Nice to see you as always. So you should have the ability, I'll hit stop share on mine, and you should be able to pull up your slides using that share screen button. I believe I gave everyone their permissions. There we go. And so I will mute myself and take myself off video, but we are recording. And just a quick reminder to our attendees, you all are muted right now during the presentation. Any questions you have, please put in the chat box and we'll be monitoring that. And at the end, if we're able, we'll have a little bit of discussion time and we may be able to unmute some of you to talk with Carl directly, okay? So I'm gonna go ahead and do what I said, which was mute myself and let Carl take over. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Melissa. And I will tell you that, you know, during the course of this, I, for whatever reason, do not see the chat box while I am talking. And so if something comes up where there's a question, I am happy to sit and answer questions while I go. I have spoken enough in my life where I don't mind being interrupted from time to time.
So I'll take that as an invitation to interrupt you now, Carl, and just say that, yes, we can, Sue and I can be looking at the chat box, and if there's something that seems that someone needs an answer as you're talking, is it okay if Sue and I jump in and let you know what the questions are so you don't have to be looking at the chat box?
Well, yeah, that's fine, because it turns out that I probably don't understand this stuff well enough for it to be an issue. So that's perfectly fine.
Great.
So yeah, there we go. I think we're, all right, there we go. It was bothering me. I had the wrong area code for the fax number. All right. So anyway, so my name is Carl Archer. I am an attorney, Archer Law Office. We have, we do essentially Medicaid and asset planning, crisis work primarily. So we help people with placements in assisted living and skilled nursing facilities. We help them with home care. We help them figure out how to get their legal documents in order. We help them with court if they need a guardianship or if their loved ones are being exploited somehow. We can see what we can do with that. And you know, first and foremost, the idea is to be a resource to the community in times where it's just very, very difficult to trust somebody, and you're operating from a place of fear, and you can just you try and do the best you can. So I have the presentation over on the other screen if you see me looking over from time to time. That's why I always say things like that, because Zoom etiquette. All of us were kind of Zoom neophytes before a couple of months ago, and then all of a sudden it was necessary to get kind of acquainted with things in a hurry. And so, now we're doing that, and so that should be fine. Okay, so moving on. All right, so there are more words on this slide than there are on the rest of them, all put together. But what we've got here is a healthcare proxy clinic. The idea being that I want to give you the ability within your setting, within your community center, library, senior center, assisted living, nursing home, anywhere else that you want to be. Within any of those, what you need to do is you want to be able to explain what these documents are to somebody quickly and easily, and then you want to give them the ability to sign those documents if it comes to it down the line, so that they are able to make decisions quickly, that they are able to do what they need to do so that they can start a conversation down the line and with their loved ones. And I think that they will realize the benefits of it by the time you're all done, which is kind of the important thing. So these slides are all available. If you guys need them, you're welcome to them. I will send you a copy of the deck. The thing about the slides is that they are not heavy on content. I tend to put very few words on slides if I can get away with it, because I'd rather that you listen to the presentation and you ask questions than you worry about what's on my slides. But there are going to be some substantive things that we're going to need to talk about. And if you're going to run a clinic through your organization, we're going to, we may need to draw up some more specific guidelines. And if that's the case, then, we'll do that. And I would be happy to help you with that. This is just something that I find really enjoyable, and I think it's a very worthwhile thing to do. So let's move to this. So I think that in order to do this right with a presentation to a bunch of people in the community, the first thing that they're going to need to know is, what is the document that they are going to be signing? Like, why are they coming here to sign a healthcare document, or what document are they actually signing? And so there needs to be some concise way of explaining to people what healthcare documents are out there and which ones are available to them. And so I'm going to do my patented or patent pending, we're going to go with patent pending crash course on how to figure out different types of healthcare documents. There are, in the overall scheme of things, exactly 2 types of healthcare documents. And so every healthcare document there is in the world, I think, falls into 2 different types. This is not the typical way that a lawyer explains things, because lawyers have an incentive to make things more complicated rather than less complicated. But this way, at least you understand what the deal is. 2 different types of healthcare documents. What are my wishes? Who's going to carry out my wishes? I think that a healthcare document will accomplish one or the other, or sometimes both of those 2 things. And we can talk about whether, what the advantages and the disadvantages are to those. So we've heard of any number of different healthcare documents, all right? And the reason for this is principally because there are lots of different ways that healthcare documents can be, that you can draft them, that there are different wishes, that there are circumstances that people find themselves under where it is necessary for them to include, or they feel it's necessary to include different things in their documents. And so you end up with lots of different varieties. There's also variations in state law sometimes that lead to the need or the desire for different documents. And so as a result, when you tell somebody, do you have a living will, for example, they'll say, no, I don't have a living will. I have a proxy. Well, that's good, and they have a healthcare document, but you're not speaking exactly the same language with them. Or, do you have a living will? No, I have a 5 wishes document. Well, it turns out that the 5 wishes document has a lot of the stuff in it that one would consider a living will to have, which is why I go back to what I said before, which is there are 2 different types of healthcare documents. What are my wishes? Who's going to carry out my wishes? This way, we can at least lump them under one of the 2 different categories, and we can move on from there. Okay, so 5 wishes. We have seen this. I've seen this in a number of the local senior centers. And the 5 wishes document, I have this one, and I have a couple of the other documents, which I'll point out in a few minutes, that are available via sample that I can distribute to anybody who wants it. If they contact me or they contact Melissa down the line, we will send them over. So 5 Wishes was created by this nonprofit called Aging with Dignity. The attempt was to create something that would work across every state due to different signature and legal requirements. And they wanted to include a lot of different holistic measures for people to provide care or medical treatment, what kind of medical treatment, that sort of thing. This is a very wide-ranging document. It covers a lot of different topics. It's definitely one of those that is both who's going to carry them out and what are the specific wishes. And if you have somebody who wants to be very thorough and thoughtful and precise about everything that they want to do, that is the way to go with it. And so, you're welcome to go through that document. You can either find it online, or again, like I said, we can send it to you. All right, so you'll also hear people say, well, I have a healthcare power of attorney. So this would be the moment where I'm going to say, you got to be careful with this word power of attorney. All right. Power of attorney is essentially a document or a methodology by which a person appoints an agent, another person, on their behalf to handle something, whatever something is. All right. So that something might be finances, and it might be healthcare. When you talk about a power of attorney, for the most part, people are assuming that a power of attorney is for things financial and legal. So I'm appointing a power of attorney so that they can pay my bills, so that they can buy and sell property, they can open and close a bank account, whatever. But these are all financial issues, sign contracts, legal issues. The healthcare one becomes a question about somebody who gets to make healthcare decisions. So that is definitely a who is going to make my decisions kind of document. In order for you to specify what that person would need to do, you would either need to have a conversation with them, or you need to add some sort of other document that explains what the nature of your healthcare wishes are. I would point out at this point, I actually skipped the graphic while we were going through this, but it being, or yesterday was yesterday, Healthcare Decisions Day 2.0, there is an object out there called the Conversation Project. And again, a quick Google search of that will get you to a website that talks about healthcare decisions, and it has various deliverables, various different kits on it that you can use to help people when they say, I don't know how to have a conversation with my loved ones about what my healthcare wishes are. And in the process, I don't know what documents I'm going to need. I don't know how these documents work. And a lot of that information is contained in their kits. I find the kits to be really useful. And so I would tell you that it wouldn't be a terrible idea if you went on there and you browse those kits, and it might be something that you would be able to incorporate into your own materials and presentations going down the line.
Excuse me, Carl, we do have a question. This is
Oh,
Sue.
okay.
Does a power of attorney have to be filed anywhere, such as courts?
Okay, so now a power of attorney here in the context that you're looking at is a financial one. If you're talking about filing a power of attorney in the state of New Jersey and let's say Pennsylvania and New York, because those are the ones that I'm licensed in, so I'll speak with some authority there. You can file or record a power of attorney if you really want to, but you don't need to. And you certainly don't need to. And there is no particular legal advantage to doing so. The only time when one really is required to record a power of attorney for finances is if one is using a power of attorney for finances to record a deed for the transfer of real estate. So you have to be able to prove that you are indeed authorized to do whatever it is that the transaction is making you do. So if I'm selling, I don't know, if Sue, if I'm going to sell your house for you, I don't let me do that, by the way, but let's just say I did. Well, I can't just sign my name and say, hi, I'm Sue, I'm selling the house. Like, let's all agree, I'm not Sue. But if I had a power of attorney that Sue signed that said, Carl can sell my house for me, then that would be okay. Otherwise, I would be committing some sort of an offense whereby I would end up in bracelets, and we don't want to do that. That's really bad. So that's a somewhat long answer to that question, but no, it's not strictly speaking necessary. For a healthcare power of attorney, you absolutely don't need to record it anywhere. And I'm not even aware of a place where you could do so. My standard advice for these two power of attorney documents is take these documents, store them in a safe place. Do not put them in a safe deposit box. Photocopies work just as well as originals do. And you make sure that your photocopies or your scans or whatever are available to you anytime that you need them. And, there are various online services that will store them if you want them. There are services that will store them on, or you could put them on a flash drive, or you could have them in email, and there's 100 different ways to do it. But, the healthcare document will go to your doctors in any hospital you go to be part of your medical records. And then the financial one it's kind of another show. So I'll leave that go. The only thing I will tell you about a healthcare one, and then I'll get off of this, is that a healthcare power of attorney, generally speaking, this says a durable power of attorney. Healthcare powers of attorney are generally not durable. They are generally only in effect when somebody lacks the ability to make their own healthcare decisions. So if let us assume for the sake of the argument today, I could make a healthcare decision, even if I had a power of attorney that designated somebody else to make the decision for me, I still make my own decisions. That person doesn't. There are various arcane exceptions to that, which I'll get out of I won't deal with right now. But the only way that somebody would be making decisions for me, if I were, incapacitated, unconscious, mentally incapacitated, something such that I can't make the decisions anymore. That's essentially what this works out to. Okay, I will move on. I realize I beat that to death. Okay, a living will. I like the cartoon on the right-hand side. So a living will, that's the one most people, now sometimes people say a living will, and what they mean is a last will and testament, which deals with property. I'm not talking about that today, but just so you know. A living will is your prototypical classical, what are my wishes document. I don't want to be in this kind of pain. I do want chemotherapy. I don't want dialysis. I do want organ donation, whatever it is, the whole list of things. All right. And you can go through that. You initial yes, initial no, write in specific things. At which point, how do I define end of life care? The whole thing. That is absolutely a what are my wishes document. The classic living will does not have any designation of a of any kind of agent in it. All right, everybody got enough of the cartoon. I'll move on. Okay. So this cartoon's not nearly as funny, but it's true. So a healthcare directive, again, it's more or less the same thing. So a directive means an order, like a I'm telling you kind of thing. And I keep pointing at the screen, but I gotta watch that for distance. But the idea is that you are saying, here are my specific wishes on specific things for healthcare. And it would be helpful, you know, in that if the things that were needed fell into that, you know, well, we know that there is an issue about artificial respiration. And so we are going to say, for purposes of artificial respiration, this is what our directive is. And we have it written down in the document, and therefore your family or your loved ones or whoever is able to follow it. All right.
Carl, excuse me, another question about the living will. Does the living will need to be revised at any time? Thank you.
So does a living will need to be revised? Well, the easy answer to that is if your wishes change, you should probably change these documents. And that actually is not just a living will question. That's a everything question. When you talk about medical decision-making documents, the idea here is that medical decision-making documents need to be revised as your needs change. And so if you say, you know, let us assume for the sake of the argument, you're healthy and you don't have chronic illnesses and you're not anticipating end of life care, you may have a certain list of healthcare decisions that you would want made in a certain way. You may have certain people that you want to make those decisions. Well, as you move on, you may find that those people either move away or they can't make decisions or they pass away or whatever the deal is. So you'd want to change that. Or you have certain specific wishes and those wishes change. You know, people's wishes and desires when they're 35 years old versus when they're 75 years old are very different. And it's entirely possible that you've got somebody who says, well, you know, I don't mind having CPR and I don't mind being on a ventilator for a little while and I don't mind this and that and the other thing because I'm young and I'm healthy and I'll bounce back and we'll kind of go from there. And then you have people who have been through a chronic illness over a long period of time and they might say, you know what, listen, I've had a good run. There's no point in cracking me open and doing this and that and the other thing. If my life expectancy is very short, it's not going to add to my quality of life, and therefore I don't want these things. And that is, those wishes you do need to change or you do need to modify from time to time based on what your, you know, how you're feeling and what your situation is. I do have an opinion on which of these documents is appropriate for our setting, and the fact that this thing is titled a healthcare proxy clinic, I think is a spoiler, but we will get there. So this is I wanted to just point out, I keep talking about all of these documents and, you know, kind of where everything goes here. I just want to point out, and I put this slide in a spot. I don't know why I put it here, but that's okay. There's this link, and again, I'll send a deck of slides out to anybody they want, but the National Council on Aging has talked a lot about what you can do about reopening senior centers and socially distanced programming. And, you know, so the one thing we're going to talk about lots of different documents and, you know, we have presentations. You can do the presentation via Zoom or you can record it or you can do anything you want to do with it. But you don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily going to tell you, well, due to the way that COVID works in your building, this is how you're going to distance out your people and your presenters and your community members and all that. I have to leave that to you. There are certainly best practices and things to talk about, and NCOA does help with that. So I will reference that again later on. Okay, so let's get to these two documents here, Proxy Directive, Instruction Directive. You'll notice that they look very similar to one another. They are through the New Jersey Commission on Legal and Ethical Problems in the Delivery of Healthcare. If you do a Google search for NJ and either Proxy Directive or Instruction Directive, these are the ones you're going to come up with. So a proxy directive is choosing a healthcare. This is the person who is going to make my decisions. There are very few things that are specific directions that are listed in a proxy directive, because the point is to appoint somebody and not so much wishes. The instruction directive is much more, if you look at the bottom of it, if you can read it, it says, you know, here, initial one of these. So I want all medically appropriate measures to maintain my life, or there are times where I wouldn't want that. And then they unpack that substantially as you go along. So the proxy directive is much more of a who's going to carry out my wishes. Instruction directive is what are my wishes. All right. Now's as good a time as any to point out, I want, for purposes of this clinic, and when you guys do the clinic, I'm going to strongly recommend that the clinic involves a proxy directive or a document that says who's going to carry out my wishes. Not so much a document that says what are my wishes, a living will or a 5 wishes or an instruction directive. In my office, I will tell you that the official position of the office is that we don't particularly like doing instruction directives and living wills. We prefer to do proxy directives. This is not a universally held legal opinion. It's mine. It is a well-considered opinion. Reasonable minds can differ, etc. But the reason for this is because people's wishes do change. And to Sue's point earlier, the trouble is that people's wishes change, and sometimes the documents don't change as fast as their wishes do. And so if you get to the point where your wishes don't reflect what's in your heart and what's in your head, and then you're incapacitated, you may find that a doctor or a hospital or a healthcare provider or other family or people who disagree might look at the document and say, but you're not following the things that are in the document, even if you know that's to be the case. And so what I always tell people is make it simple. Don't rein yourself in with extra writing. Use the instruction directive and then have a conversation. We have heard this many, many times. Have a conversation, which brings us back to the deal that we talked about earlier with the conversation project. Have a conversation. Lay out what your general quality of life goals are, and then let those people be guided accordingly as your healthcare needs change, as your life expectancy evolves, and you're able to make the appropriate decisions at the appropriate time. All right. Now, a handful of other documents that lawyers don't get themselves involved in. Any of you guys who were on the presentation with goals of care some weeks ago heard some conversation about a pulsed form. There are some states in which case that in where it has other names, but that's what it's called here in New Jersey. It's called a pulsed. It's a medical order. It's filled out by a doctor in consultation with a client, with a patient, and it lays out some specific wishes, and it lays out a person who it gets to make medical decisions. In the absence of any of these documents, let's say you didn't have any of these at all, they look at HIPAA, federal privacy laws, to figure out who they can talk to, who's going to make decisions. You know, I just to share an example, I have a family member who had a long-term relationship, but he wasn't married to the person, and he didn't particularly trust anybody else to make healthcare decisions for him except for his partner of a long time. He became suddenly and acutely ill and was unable to make decisions, but he didn't have a healthcare decision-making document. And so his partner was unable to make those decisions, and instead his siblings ended up having to make the decisions for him. And he had never had a conversation about those decisions with his siblings. And so they were doing whatever it is that they felt like they needed to do. And that's I'm not saying whether it worked out well or poorly. That's not really for me to say, but I can say that it introduced a degree of uncertainty and fear and panic and crisis into a situation that didn't need more of that. Certainly didn't need more of that. So getting back to a post will allow you to specify some of those things. It is a little bit more granular than a directive type form because it's involving a medical professional. They tend to be a little bit more specific about things. The other thing that's worth pointing out about this is, again, that it's not a legal document and it is part of your medical records, but a lawyer doesn't have anything to do with it. So I don't bother with them. I know what they are, but I'm not qualified. I don't have to write letters after my name. Okay. The cat. Okay. So the next thing is I get this a lot in the office. People say, well, can you do a DNR for us? DNR, do not resuscitate. And the answer essentially is no. A do not resuscitate is a document that says, please do not resuscitate me. Well, that in the home-based setting is essentially useless for reasons that are beyond the scope of what I want to get into right now. And that you can make that notation on a chart in a hospital, in a nursing home, in some sort of healthcare setting, and that is more useful. But at home, it tends to be not so useful. But those documents are definitely not drawn up by legal professionals, and you could specify that in a proxy, or with a healthcare, with a living will or some sort of instruction directive, but not otherwise. DNI is do not intubate. So just so you have an idea of what those things are.
Carl, we had one question, I beg your pardon, to backtrack to the post. When should a post be created?
So my understanding of it is that doctors don't usually do a post for somebody who has a life expectancy that exceeds a year. Now, I'm saying this based off memory, and I could be mistaken, but it is my understanding that generally people do not have a post. Like somebody in their 30s or 40s who is otherwise healthy and has an unremarkable medical history would not get a pulse done. This tends to be for people who are contemplating end-of-life care in some form or fashion. Okay, so anyway, I've spent a half an hour talking about how we have all these various different healthcare documents, which is wonderful and everything, and which one are my preferences and all that. So how do you actually run the darn thing? So again, where I'm looking at here is I am saying it's really important to know who it is that a person is naming in order to carry out their wishes. All right, and that is something that people may have in their head when they come in, and it may not. And so part of the challenge is to get them to have that information in mind so that they can sign a document. If we look at I'm going to go back a couple of slides here once. If we look at the Proxy Directive, all right, and I'm pointing at a screen that you guys are looking at. I don't know why I'm pointing at it, but if you look at what it says here, it has, I choose this person as a healthcare representative. I choose alternate representatives. And on the second page, there is a signature page for the person that is signing it, and there is a space for 2 witnesses. And essentially, as long as you can fill in all of those blanks, you have yourself a functioning healthcare proxy. And so the key thing is to get all of those things kind of addressed so that by the time somebody is ready to sit in front of someone to draft these documents, all right, or to write them out, because they can be handwritten, and that's, you could have this blank form and then you could handwrite in all of the names, and that is perfectly fine. And that's how I would suggest you do it, unless you have this thing in a Word copy. As long as they know all of these things, then you're fine. That's essentially where we're at. Now, I would note the alternative representatives have address, city, state, telephone number. Those are not legally required. The reason why they're there is because it makes it easier for healthcare professionals or somebody to contact someone in the case of an emergency. And so if somebody came in and they said, well, I want my friend John Jones to be the alternate representative, but I don't know where he lives, he just moved, that's okay. Just put down what information you have and you would be all right there. You know, there's home address and telephone number of the main representative. It's the same deal. You're just trying to identify people to the best that you can. All right. So let's go through this we'll go through them one thing at a time. Name, you print the person's name. Now, in order for the person to be able to sign one of these things, they need to have the legal capacity required in order to sign a healthcare document. Now, I think I've mentioned, I hope you were under the impression that you did not need a lawyer in order to run one of these healthcare clinics. I do not think that you do need a lawyer in order to draft one of these, to do one of these documents in order to have a healthcare clinic. Full stop. I don't think you need to. So what I think you need to do is you need to understand what the legal standard is in order for someone to be able to sign one of these. So what does a proxy do? A proxy says, this is the person who is going to make healthcare decisions for me. So they need to be able to identify a person. They need to be able to identify what a healthcare decision is. And they need to be able to understand why that person should make the healthcare decisions. Now, this could be very easy. I choose my spouse to make any decisions regarding my end-of-life care because my spouse knows me better than anybody. Good, done, very easy. It often isn't that easy. You know, I'm going to choose this person. Okay, they're going to make decisions for me if I can't. Okay, but I don't know what decisions. So I will say to people, okay, I need you to tell me, do you understand what a medical decision is? And they'll say, no. Or for purposes of my example, they'll say no. And I'll say, all right, well, listen, I have in my desk a vial of flu vaccine. I don't, just so you know, but let's just say I did. I would like to administer to you a flu vaccine. And for the record, if a lawyer ever tells you they're going to stick you with a needle, say no. That's supposed to be, I got like 4 jokes. You got like 3 of them already. And then I'd say to them, would you like a flu shot or not? And, you know, they say yes, they say no, whatever it is. I go, listen, you just made a medical decision. Do I want a flu shot? Do I need a flu shot? There you go. If they can't make that determination, generally the example I'm giving is clear enough where they'll be all right. You could make up a different example if you wanted one, but they need to be able to understand that that is a medical decision and that those are the sorts of decisions that they are going to allow somebody else to make. And that they should have a conversation with that person about what their healthcare wishes are. If you can get there, you're good enough. You don't have to do cognitive testing. The person can have memory loss issues. They do not need to remember what they did 10 minutes from now. They just need to be, in the moment, you need to be able to understand what their deal is. And if you have somebody who is 1 or 2 people specifically who are going to make these determinations as you go along, that's great. That's how you would do it. And I'm going to skip forward a couple slides, and I reserve the right to go back. So don't get dizzy on me here. Okay. So again, you want to talk about what kind of document and who's going to carry out your wishes, and talk about the nature of the conversation. All right. Who can carry out these clinics? I really think they could be done anywhere. Social, in any kind of adult daycare. I think you could do them in senior centers. I think you could do them in libraries. I think you could do them in community centers. You want to do them outside. And today it's raining outside my office, but you could do them anywhere, and I think it would be fine. You could use a parking lot, and you could run them separate tables. Yeah, I'll leave the logistics up to you. But we talk about evaluating people for capacity. Do you need to do a mental health evaluation in order to get people to sign these documents? I don't think so. If we were going to do a financial power of attorney, I think the answer is yes. I would not do a clinic for a financial power of attorney without having a lawyer present to evaluate things. And I would tell you that if your people do not feel comfortable with somebody signing a medical decision-making document, don't let them do it. Tell them that they need to talk to a lawyer. Tell them that they need to, that they need to do something like that. I don't think that you need to let people sign documents. I think if you have a doubt, don't force people to sign documents. Don't give them the impression that that anyone is going to sign them regardless. The other thing to look out for, and we've all seen this from time to time, is you get somebody comes in with their child, and the child very clearly wants one of these documents done, and the child starts answering all of the questions. Or the person who's going to sign the document, every time you ask them a question, they look over at the child in order to get the answer to the question. These are red flags for any kind of capacity. Or you talk about people who are potentially vulnerable, and those are things that you really want to be careful about. And so I would tell you that, if you're in doubt, don't have people sign things, but you're not talking about the full level of functioning that one would worry about in order to sign contracts or a power of attorney, something along those lines. All right. So that's the person. Who do they want to have make the decisions? You get alternates. I love naming alternates. You name alternates, it takes 5 seconds to write an alternate down. If you do not have an alternate written and the first person cannot act, the document may as well not exist. You like alternates if you can get them. All right. Now, I do think it's important that you explain to people the different types of forms, but I think you should do it in very, very general terms. I like here's the 2 types of documents. Here's the one we're doing today. This is the reason we're doing it today. This is what's required. You need to do the document, and then you need to have a conversation. All right. And I think in that process, you're giving people the right expectations for what it is they're signing. And I think that if you do a proxy, I think if you can have somebody talk to someone to evaluate capacity, make sure that they have names and all that taken care of, and they can sign their documents. The 2 witnesses that you would have present would sign it, and away you go. And I think you can do it in less than 15 minutes. With a living will, it's going to take a lot longer than that. And that's why another reason I don't think it's a great idea. You're going to have to ask a lot of invasive questions. You're going to ask a lot of questions people don't necessarily have the answers to about specific healthcare wishes because they haven't thought them through. And then your people are going to be there all day long. The other thing I would point out is I keep mentioning you have a discussion about healthcare, which I think should be some sort of presentation, could be electronic, could be somebody with a PowerPoint deck. It could be, I would recommend not doing this presentation individually to people because it just takes too long. But I do think that this whole thing needs to be done in person. And the reason I think it needs to be done in person is because you need 2 witnesses. The witnesses need to be over the age of 18. The witnesses need to not be the designated healthcare representative or the alternate representative. I can't tell you how many times I have seen those last 2 issues being violated, making the witness signatures invalid. Now, this isn't to say that doctors or whoever will pick up on it from time to time, but I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm saying to my folks, well, I let it sign, and I guess I hope they don't notice. I hope they don't notice is a terrible legal defense. All right.
Carl, excuse me, we have two questions. Just to confirm, for the proxy directive, does it have to be notarized?
Okay, so strictly speaking, a proxy or living will, instead of having two witnesses over the age of 18 who are not the representative or the alternate representative, could instead have no witnesses, but simply have the signature acknowledged by a notary public or someone who is authorized by law to take acknowledgments of signatures. You notice I stay away from the explicit word notarizing because it's everybody says it, I say it, but an attorney can acknowledge a signature, a judge can acknowledge a signature, the county clerk can acknowledge a signature, or a notary public. So you could do it that way. I think it's easier to find two random people to be witnesses than I think it is to find a notary. And so that's why I would say, all else equal, don't use a notary. Also, the form that I am recommending you use, this proxy directive, has space for two witnesses and not for a notary. I mean, if you had your own form that had something acknowledged by a notary public, go right ahead. But I think if I went to a random place and I said, do I have two people here versus do I have a notary, I'm going to be much more successful having two people. That's why I've always suggested that. What was the other question?
And the other one is, should psychiatric advance directives be addressed at these clinics as well? Thank you.
Okay. So so I had said that advance directives are not any advance directives, any kind of healthcare decision-making document, are not durable. Well, they are not, yeah, they're not durable. They are springing, which is to say that they only take effect when somebody becomes incapacitated. And then I said, but there's an exception, and I'm not going to get into it because it's beyond the scope of the presentation. Now, because I have a very smart audience here, the audience mentions to me, why don't you talk about a psychiatric advance directive? So fine. Psychiatric advance directive, very short answer, is filled out by somebody who has capacity, who says, listen, I have psychiatric issues, and from time to time, I may be in a position where I do not have capacity, and notwithstanding the fact that, or I may be under the burden of some sort of mental illness, I may be schizophrenic, whatever. And notwithstanding the fact that I have that, I may be in the thrall of that mental illness, I want this person and these instructions to be followed because this is for my best interest, and to ignore anything I say while I am acutely ill due to some sort of psychiatric issue. I think, I'm inclined to say, that those documents are a little too advanced for some sort of mass clinic like this. I think that that is an inclination. I have a form, I could use it, but I feel like that requires explaining to the person who has a mental illness how it is that this thing will take effect and won't take effect, and the consequences of their actions. Because you're talking about abridging or curtailing the individual rights of a person who will return to capacity at some point. Whereas very often, a person who is signing one of these healthcare documents that I've been talking about for the last 45 minutes, this is almost always in the context of either a serious illness or an end-of-life condition. And so my initial inclination would be to say, I don't like doing the psychiatric advance directives in this. This would be one where you would kind of point them off to the side and see if there was some way to help them other than to try and do it in the context of the clinic. The idea of the clinic is to get as many of these documents done in as short a period of time as possible. So you have the person, you have their representative, you have their alternate representatives. There's some space in the instruction directive form for specific wishes. It's very, very, very small. My form, I changed it a little bit just to have a blank if somebody really wants to write something in. The example I give is that I have somebody who one time came to my office and said, I want to write in here that I want to have a cup of chocolate ice cream at 4 o'clock every afternoon. And if I can't have the cup of chocolate ice cream at 4 o'clock, that I want them to discontinue any life-saving measures. Now, I like ice cream as much as the next guy, but this seemed a little weird to me. So I asked why, and the explanation I got was that ever since that this person was an adolescent, they had a tradition with loved ones, with whatever, where they were at a farm and they would sit outside and they would look out in the outside, or they look out the window, and they would have a cup of chocolate ice cream at 4 o'clock every afternoon. And it was something that centered them. It was something like, tea time. It was something that gave them peace during the course of a day. And if it wasn't 4 o'clock, it was when they got home from work or whatever, but it was just a thing that they did every day. And the enjoyment of the ice cream and the peace that came with that time was just a reminder of the pleasures of life. And if they got to the point where that sort of thing was impossible for them, it was a sign that their quality of life had eroded to the point where it didn't make any sense to kind of continue on, which made a lot more sense than the way it was originally explained to me. So this is, you write something in. 2 witnesses. The witnesses, again, I'm going to repeat this because it bears repeating. They have to be over the age of 18. They need to not be listed as the representative or the alternate representative. So if somebody comes in, if you bring your mother, your brother, whoever, and they want to name you as the agent, have somebody else do the witnessing. But the reason why this needs to be done in person is because the witnessing, you need to watch the person sign, and the person needs to watch you sign. And so if you're doing it virtually and we're on Zoom, and I have a healthcare proxy form, and I go ahead and I sign the form, and then I take this off screen and I put it here. I've lost chain of custody. Like, you don't know that the thing I signed, you saw me sign something, but you don't know what my signature looks like. And by the time it gets over to you, you don't know that that's the thing. And when did you get it compared to when I signed it? Lawyers have a field day with stuff like this. And so the very short answer to it is these need to be done contemporaneously. 1 signature, 2 signature, 3 signature, and then you're done. The electronic thing, you could do the presentation via Zoom. Nobody cares about you. Do set it up as a recorded one. You could do it where people take questions. You can do that any way you want to. But the signatures and that whole assembly line thing needs to take place in your in whatever setting you have. And again, I leave the logistics to you because you know your building better than I do. So again, it's have a presentation. The conversation is important. Get the originals, the photocopies are fine. Have the thing filled out. You make sure that that everything is ready to go, that all of that information is there. You could even have a 1-pager that says, what is my name? Who do I want to have as my agent? Here are my backups. Do I have any specific wishes? If that person who is doing the evaluation fills that out, hands it to them, they go over to the witness station. The witnesses fill it out, or that person fills it out as they go, the first one. Sign it, the 2 witnesses, and away they go. The whole process probably takes less than 15 minutes. You have a couple of witness teams. You have a couple people there. You could have 50 people do one of these things in a couple of hours. And I think that this is a way to get a tremendous number of people to have these documents in a short period of time. And the reason why we care is because most of the time, nobody cares about healthcare decisions while they can make them themselves. But end-of-life decision-making is something that is emotionally fraught and has a way to linger on people's minds well after somebody passes away. The other thing is that having very specific healthcare conversations has a direct correlation to 2 things. First of all, improved outcomes. And I don't mean people stay alive longer, because that's often not the outcome we're after. What I mean is that you've improved quality of life at the end of lifetime, first. Second, there's direct data that shows that you've actually decreased the amount of Medicare and other healthcare spending during the last 12 months of life when you have one of these documents and you have this cogent conversation in place. And by having this conversation, the conversation takes the place of a document that was written 5 or 10 or 20 years ago that says, oh, I want everything done, or I want specific things done, which may or may not apply right now. And this way, you can take action, you can take specific action, knowing it's what the person wanted in the moment, and you avoid invasive, unnecessary, painful procedures, and you give somebody the way to maximize their quality of life. Now, the other thing I would point out, and I have specific permission to do this from Melissa, I have gone to great lengths not to sell anything here. I am not selling anything. Any assistance that any of you need to put on one of these clinics, I will be happy to provide you. This is being recorded, and I know it's being recorded, so I will say it again. I do any assistance for the healthcare clinics, I will donate my time. It's all at no charge. It is my pleasure to do that. And so I want to make sure that you guys understand that I will happily help you with this, because I really think it's important to do. I also think it would be useful and possible to do this clinic for a financial and legal power of attorney. The advantage to having a financial and legal power of attorney is that you avoid the inability to get documents to apply for public assistance. You avoid situations where exploitation can happen because people's capacity isn't where it needs to be. And you avoid the need to go to court and get a guardianship if these things are done sufficiently far in advance. What I have said, and the reason why I said I'm not selling, is because I would offer a clinic like this, and we would work out the logistics where we could get a bunch of people. I could bring my staff in to do this, and I would charge people a number that would be substantially less than what they would do if they came into the office, because we did a bunch of it. And again, because I'm being recorded, I feel like I can say this. I would take the entire net proceeds and we would donate them to a charity that, you know, you and I figured out. And I think it's a great way to raise a substantial amount of money and to provide some really useful legal services at a reasonable cost for people, and to provide a lot of value to them. The healthcare document, I wouldn't consider charging people for, principally because those documents are so widely available. That is more of an educational tool, and that's something where I think you guys could set that up quickly and easily. And I kind of went through the details, but I think that that's where you could go with this and make a big difference in a lot of families down the line. So I have 2 minutes left, which means that I'm done. And so, Sue, if there are any additional questions, otherwise I'll let Melissa wrap us up.
Thanks so much, Carl. Really appreciate it. I think that was wonderful. And as Sue sees if there's any more questions in the chat box, and if you do have any burning questions for Carl now, please do put them in the chat box so that Sue can let us know that they're there. That was a wonderful presentation, Carl. We really appreciate you going through that. I do want to remind everyone about what you had said earlier about the guidance from NCOA about reopening. For those of you on the call who might be related to senior centers or to other municipal government services, you may have tuned in earlier this week to the New Jersey Parks and Recreation Association webinar, which did share those details as well as some other information. And so if you haven't done that, you can also reach out to me and I'll link you with the folks who have that information. If you do just have general concerns about you know, how to engage people still during COVID and what they're looking at in terms of reopening of senior centers in particular, but useful information for other folks who do programming with older adults in that way. And thanks, Carl, again, also for reminding people of the Conversation Project. As I mentioned, National Healthcare Decision Day was yesterday, and so that was that's something where you can get more information about Conversation Project, as well as a program called Conversation of Your Life, which is also available you know, through, if you Google that, all this stuff, you know, you Google these things and you can find more information. But those of you, again, tied to municipal government, where your mayors may have done something called the Mayor's Wellness Campaign, the Conversation of Your Life is one of the programs that mayors can select to do. And it really does talk about how to have these conversations. And so it's really excellent. So I do see, Carl, that you have answered Renee directly, and that's great. Yes, Carl did say that if you have questions and you want to follow up with him, please do feel free to reach out to Carl within reason, you know, in terms of guidance. I'll say that. I know Carl
also without reason would be fine. I would point out, I didn't get to my last slide because I didn't, but when we send these along,
yeah.
You'll have my email address, and
right.
do what you need to do.
Yes. So those of you who, again, may have joined us for our other webinar series, you know that we'll do a follow-up early next week with the slides attached, as well as access to the recording of this session. So just as a reminder for all of you, we are recording this, and so the recording as well as Carl's slides will be sent out to you via email early next week. So you'll also have Carl's contact information within the slides, and you'll be able to reach out to him directly if you want to do that. So that's great. So that, you know, I think about wraps us up. Unless, Sue, do you have any other questions from folks?
No, I don't see any. I think, Carl, you answered them all during the course of your presentation.
Exactly.
And thank you very much for that.
Terrific. So just want to give folks one more piece of information. Those of you who are familiar with NJFA, you know, and I think I've said before on other webinars if you've been with us, our annual conference in June is something that we greatly look forward to join all of you in person and see you and have a good time. But as you know, we've been postponing it due to the impact of COVID-19, and so we've made the ultimate decision to go virtual. And so if you want to go check out our website, that information will be there shortly with the agenda for both days and registration and all that great information. So please do check out our website for that, and do follow up with us if you have questions. Just want to remind you to stay tuned to all the things we're doing at NJFA. We're working on some more webinars that will be coming to you shortly, and don't forget to tune into Aging Insights, which is our public access TV program, which is also available on YouTube, and you can subscribe to our YouTube channel to get alerted to new episodes if you're interested in that information. And if you want to go scroll through our YouTube channel, you can see a few months back that Carl also joined us on Aging Insights and provided some additional information about exactly what he began talking about today, which is the different types of documents. So super informative, great stuff. So just want to thank, again, Carl for joining us and for sharing all this great information and for making yourself available to our network. And thank you all for joining us today for this really informative webinar and for staying engaged with us throughout all of this. If you do have questions or concerns, please do feel free to follow up with me directly. You can find my email on our website, or you can just click on the website and look for more information, and we'd be happy to assist you. So with that, we are over time, and I will let everyone go, but just wanted to say thanks again, and everybody have a great weekend.